The whispers started the moment Jackson stepped into the grand ballroom of the Hilton in downtown Columbus. Old faces from high school turned eyes narrowing in recognition as the familiar sting of mockery resurfaced after a decade, but this time he was not the same scared kid he had been. The strength he carried came from years of building a life he was proud of. The banner above the stage still read "Welcome Back, Class of 2014" in faded blue and gold, the same colors that once felt like chains around his chest. Jackson adjusted his tie, smoothed the front of his crisp navy button-down, and scanned the room for a friendly face, but found mostly the same groups huddled together, laughing too loud at inside jokes he had never been part of. He remembered the day he came out in the cafeteria during junior year. The words had tumbled out after months of hiding who he was. "I like guys," he had said simply to his best friend at the time, Tyler, who had stared at him like he had grown a second head. By the end of the week, the entire school knew. Lockers were slammed in his face, notes with slurs were taped to his backpack, and the football players made sure to shoulder check him in the halls just hard enough to remind him he did not belong. His parents had been worse. His father, a factory supervisor in their small Ohio town, had barely spoken to him for months after the news reached home. His mother cried quietly at the kitchen table, asking what she had done wrong. Jackson had learned early that love came with conditions, and those conditions were heavy. After graduation, he had packed one suitcase and taken the first bus to New York City with nothing but a scholarship to a small community college and a burning need to breathe. The city had swallowed him whole at first, the noise, the crowds, the anonymity that felt like freedom. He worked 2 jobs, studied graphic design, and slowly pieced together a version of himself that did not apologize for existing. Friends came and went, but none stayed long enough to see the scars. Until Maddox. Jackson smiled at the memory as he accepted a name tag from the volunteer table. Maddox King, 32. Tech entrepreneur who had built a cybersecurity firm from his apartment in Brooklyn to a company valued at over $50 million. They had met 2 years ago at a charity gala for LGBTQ youth. Jackson had been there designing the event materials on a shoestring budget. Maddox had been the keynote speaker, talking about his own journey from a conservative family in Pennsylvania to becoming one of the youngest CEOs on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Their eyes had met across the room during the cocktail hour, and something clicked. Not fireworks, but a quiet recognition, like finding the missing piece of a puzzle you did not know you were solving. Maddox had approached him later that night with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "You look like you could use a real conversation," he had said with that easy smile that made Jackson feel seen for the first time in years. They had talked for hours about everything and nothing: the pressure of small-town expectations, the fear of being too much or not enough, the way success sometimes felt like armor rather than victory. Maddox had listened without pity, without trying to fix him. Just listened. And when Jackson had finally opened up about the reunion invitation, sitting unopened on his kitchen counter for weeks, Maddox had simply said go. But not alone. Now standing in the ballroom, Jackson checked his phone. Maddox's flight from New York had been delayed, but he would be here soon. "Just hold the fort, babe," the text read with a heart emoji that still made Jackson grin like a teenager. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and moved toward the bar, ordering a soda water with lime. A group of former cheerleaders spotted him, and their conversation dipped into hushed tones. "Is that Jackson Reed?" one whispered. "Still single, I bet. Probably too busy being gay to settle down." The words were loud enough to carry, and a few laughs followed. Jackson felt the old heat rise in his cheeks, but he kept his shoulders straight. He had practiced this moment in the mirror more times than he cared to admit. Tyler approached, then the same Tyler who had spread the rumors all those years ago, now wearing a faded polo and a beer gut. "Hey man, long time," he said, clapping Jackson on the shoulder a little too hard. "Heard you moved to the big city. Doing what, design stuff, right? Must be nice not having to worry about real work." Jackson forced a smile. "Yeah, something like that." Tyler leaned in closer. "Still into dudes, or did you grow out of that phase?" The group around them chuckled. Jackson opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught. Not because he was ashamed, but because he realized how small this room felt now. How small these people were. He took a breath. "Actually, I am still very much into dudes. And proud of it." The laughter died down a notch, but Tyler just smirked. "Good for you, man. Hope you brought a date. Would love to meet the lucky guy." The sarcasm dripped like cheap cologne. Jackson was about to reply when the double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and the energy in the room shifted. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Maddox stood there in a tailored charcoal suit, his broad shoulders filling the doorway perfectly. His dark hair was styled just enough to look effortless, and his confident stride carried him straight toward Jackson, as if the entire room had disappeared. Maddox reached him in seconds, pulling him into a quick but warm hug right there in front of everyone. "Sorry, late traffic was brutal," he said loud enough for nearby ears to hear. Then he turned to the group still frozen in place and extended a hand to Tyler. "Maddox King, Jackson's partner. Nice to meet you." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler fumbled a handshake, his face flushing. The cheerleaders stared, mouths open. Jackson felt a surge of something he had not felt in this town before, pure, unfiltered pride. This was not about proving anything to them. It was about standing in his truth with a man who had helped him believe it was worth fighting for. The night was just beginning, and already the past felt smaller than it ever had. Jackson and Maddox found a quiet corner table away from the main crowd. Maddox ordered them both fresh drinks and listened as Jackson recounted the opening salvos of mockery, his voice steady but laced with the old pain. "You handled that like a pro," Maddox said, squeezing his hand under the table. "But you should not have to handle it at all." Jackson nodded. "I know. But being here brings it all back. The nights I cried in my room wondering if I would ever be normal. The way my dad stopped coming to my games after I came out." Maddox's eyes softened. "You are normal, Jax. You are extraordinary. And those people who made you doubt that do not get to define you anymore." They talked for over an hour, catching up on the flight delay and the latest deal Maddox had closed that morning. Around them, former classmates stole glances, some curious, some envious. A few brave ones approached, offering awkward hellos and congratulations on what they assumed was a new relationship. Jackson corrected them gently. 2 years, actually. Maddox is my rock." One woman, a former lab partner named Sarah, pulled up a chair. "I always wondered what happened to you after high school. You seemed so sad back then." Jackson smiled. But I found my way." Sarah glanced at Maddox. "Looks like you found more than a way." The conversation flowed easier after that, stories of college mishaps, career wins, and the small victories of everyday life. As the evening wore on, the DJ started playing the old hits, and the dance floor filled. Jackson and Maddox joined for a slow song, swaying together under the twinkling lights. No one openly stared, but the energy had shifted from ridicule to reluctant respect. Tyler kept his distance, nursing a beer in the corner. Jackson caught his eye once and offered a small nod, no malice, just acknowledgement that time had moved on. Maddox whispered in his ear, "You okay?" "Better than okay," Jackson replied. "This feels like closing a chapter one did not know was still open." The night stretched late into conversations about dreams and regrets. Jackson shared how the move to New York had saved him, how designing logos for startups had turned into a thriving freelance career. Maddox talked about the pressure of leading a company while staying true to his values, the late nights, the boardroom battles, and the quiet moments when he wondered if success was enough. Together, they had learned to balance both worlds, the ambition and the tenderness. By the time they left the ballroom hand in hand, the mockery that had greeted Jackson felt like a distant echo, replaced by something stronger, a quiet triumph that no one could take away. The drive back to their hotel that night was quiet but comfortable. Maddox kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Jackson's knee as the Columbus skyline faded behind them. "You were incredible back there," he said softly. Jackson leaned his head against the seat. "I almost walked out when Tyler started in. But then you walked through those doors and everything clicked into place." Maddox smiled. "That was the plan. Show up, support you, and remind everyone that you are not the same person they tried to break." Back in their room, Jackson kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the king bed. The reunion had stirred up memories he thought were buried. Like the time in senior year when the prom committee had voted to uninvite him after he asked a male friend to go as friends. Or the family dinner where his uncle had made a toast to real men and his father had laughed along. Maddox changed into sweatpants and joined him, pulling Jackson close. "Tell me what is running through your head right now." Jackson exhaled slowly. "How close I came to believing them." that I would never be loved or successful or worthy. You changed that. Their relationship had not been easy at first. Maddox had his own baggage from a father who had disowned him at 18 for the same reason. They had spent months talking through late-night phone calls and weekend visits, learning to trust that love did not have to come with an expiration date. Jackson remembered their first real fight 6 months, and when Maddox had pushed him to apply for a bigger design contract. You are talented, Jackson, but you play small because you are scared they will reject you again. The words had hurt, but they were true. Jackson had landed the contract, and with it a wave of confidence that carried him through the next year. Now lying in the hotel room, they talked about the future. Maddox's company was expanding into Chicago, and he wanted Jackson to consider moving the freelance base there to be closer to family if reconciliation ever happened. Jackson was hesitant. My parents have not spoken more than 10 words to me in years. What if showing up with you makes it worse? Maddox kissed his forehead. Or it could be the start of something better. We do not have to decide tonight. Just know I am in this for the long haul. The next morning, they flew back to New York together. Jackson stared out the plane window, watching the Midwest give way to the East Coast. The reunion had been a test, and he had passed it not by fighting, but by simply being himself with a man he loved. Back in their Brooklyn brownstone, Maddox cooked breakfast while Jackson sketched ideas for a new client project. The domestic rhythm felt grounding after the emotional whirlwind. Elena, their mutual friend and Jackson's college roommate, called later that day. How did it go? She asked, excitement in her voice. Jackson laughed. Better than I expected. Maddox showed up like a knight in shining armor, and the room went dead silent. Elena cheered. I knew it. You two are unstoppable. That week, Jackson threw himself into work designing a campaign for a nonprofit that supported LGBTQ youth in rural areas. The project hit close to home, and he poured every ounce of his past pain into the visuals, making sure the message was one of hope. Maddox reviewed the drafts late one night over takeout. This is powerful, babe. You are turning your story into something that helps others. Jackson felt a swell of pride. It was the first time he had seen his experiences as fuel rather than a burden. But the high from the reunion did not last forever. A few days later, an email from his mother arrived. We heard you were at the reunion. Your cousin saw the photos online. She did not mention Maddox, but the tone felt like a door cracking open. Jackson read it to Maddox over dinner. Should I reply? He asked. Maddox nodded. Tell her the truth. That you are happy and loved. The reply took Jackson 3 drafts, but he sent it simple and honest. I'm doing well, Mom. I have someone special in my life who makes me better every day. Hope we can talk soon. The response came quicker than expected. Maybe next month when we visit your aunt in the city. Jackson stared at the screen, heart racing. It was not a full embrace, but it was movement. As the weeks passed, Jackson noticed changes in himself. He walked taller, spoke up in client meetings, and stopped second-guessing his instincts. Maddox noticed, too. You are glowing, he teased one evening as they walked through Prospect Park. Jackson squeezed his hand. I feel like I finally own my story instead of letting it own me. Their bond deepened through the small things, shared laughter over bad movies, quiet mornings with coffee, and the way Maddox always knew when Jackson needed space or a hug. Yet not everything was smooth. An old high school acquaintance reached out on social media congratulating him on a relationship, but then slipped in a comment about how surprised he was that Jackson had landed someone like Maddox. The implication stung. Jackson showed the message to Maddox, who shook his head. People project their own insecurities. Do not let it dim what we have. Jackson deleted the message and focused on the present. Months slipped by, and the reunion became a turning point rather than a scar. Jackson and Maddox traveled to Chicago for a business conference where Maddox was speaking. Jackson attended as his +1, sitting in the front row, watching his partner command the stage with quiet authority. After the talk, they celebrated with dinner overlooking Lake Michigan. Maddox raised his glass. To facing the past and building a future. Jackson clinked his. Toast. Back home, challenges tested them. Maddox's company hit a rough patch with a major investor, pulling out over a misunderstanding. Late nights turned into all-nighters, and Jackson saw the toll it took. He stepped up cooking meals, running errands, and reminding Maddox to breathe. One night, after a particularly brutal board call, Maddox broke down in the living room. "I feel like I am failing everyone." Jackson held him close. "You are not. You have built something incredible, and I am here no matter what." The crisis passed, but it brought them closer, proving their love was not just for the good times. Jackson faced his own test when a major client requested changes that watered down the LGBTQ inclusive message in his campaign. He pushed back politely, but firmly explaining why authenticity mattered. The client relented, and the project won an industry award. Maddox was there at the ceremony, beaming as Jackson accepted the plaque. "You stood your ground," he whispered later. "That is the man I love." Family tension simmered in the background. Jackson's mother called one Sunday afternoon, her voice tentative. "Your father and I are thinking about coming to New York for a weekend." Jackson swallowed hard. "We would love that. Bring Maddox if you want," she added. It was the first time she had acknowledged the relationship. Jackson hung up and hugged Maddox tightly. "They are trying." Maddox smiled. "And so are we." The visit was awkward at first. His parents arrived with suitcases and guarded expressions. Dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant was filled with small talk about the weather and work. But over dessert, Jackson's father cleared his throat. "We saw pictures from the reunion. You looked happy, son." Jackson nodded. "I am. Maddox is the best thing that ever happened to me." His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "We were wrong to push you away. It took us too long to see that." Tears welled, but Jackson held them back. "It means everything to hear that." The weekend ended with tentative plans for a holiday visit to Ohio. Not perfect, but real progress. Through it all, Jackson and Maddox carved out time for joy. Weekend hikes in the Catskills, lazy Sundays reading side by side, and volunteering at the youth center where they had met. Jackson mentored a young teen struggling with coming out, sharing his story without the bitterness. "You are not alone," he told the boy. "There are people who will love you exactly as you are." Maddox watched from the sidelines, pride shining in his eyes. A minor betrayal tested their circle when a mutual friend leaked a private photo from the reunion to a gossip blog, framing it as a flashy display of wealth. Comments poured in, some supportive, some snide, about gold diggers and show-offs. Jackson felt exposed again, the old fears resurfacing. Maddox handled the PR fallout, swiftly issuing a simple statement about love and privacy. In the quiet after, he pulled Jackson onto the couch. "This is not about us. It is noise. We know our truth." Jackson leaned into him. "I hate that it still affects me." Maddox kissed his temple. "It will get easier. You are stronger than the noise." The year turned, and with it came deeper commitment. Maddox proposed one crisp autumn evening on the Brooklyn Bridge with the city lights sparkling around them. Not with a grand spectacle, but with a simple ring and words from the heart. Jackson yes 1,000 times. They celebrated quietly with Elena and close friends, planning a small wedding for the following spring. Life felt full balance between past lessons and future dreams. Winter brought its own reflections. Jackson and Maddox spent Christmas in Ohio with his parents, the first time in years. Snow blanketed the familiar streets, and the house smelled of pine and cinnamon. Jackson's father helped Maddox chop wood for the fireplace, a small gesture that spoke volumes. His mother baked cookies with Jackson in the kitchen, asking gentle questions about their life in New York. It was not all smooth. Conversations about the past surfaced, and apologies were exchanged through tears. Jackson felt layers of hurt peeling away, replaced by cautious hope. Back in the city, work intensified. Jackson launched his own small design studio, hiring 2 assistants and focusing on brands that aligned with his values. Maddox's company recovered stronger than before, securing new contracts that allowed more flexibility. They used the extra time to plan the wedding, simple, elegant, with a focus on chosen family. Elena agreed to be maid of honor, and Tyler surprisingly sent a congratulatory card after seeing the announcement online. Jackson replied with genuine thanks, closing another loop. Spring arrived with blooming cherry trees and final wedding preparations. The night before the ceremony, Jackson and Maddox shared a quiet dinner alone, reflecting on their journey. From the reunion mockery to this moment of commitment, everything had led here. Maddox took Jackson's hands. "You taught me what real strength looks like." Jackson smiled. "And you taught me what love without conditions feels like." The wedding was perfect, held in a sunlit garden with close friends and family. Vows were spoken with steady voices, promising to face every challenge together. As they danced under string lights, Jackson glanced around, seeing faces that once judged, now smiling with acceptance. The past had lost its power. Summer brought a honeymoon in Italy, where they wandered cobblestone streets and talked about expanding their family through adoption someday. Jackson sketched landscapes while Maddox read business books, and they both soaked in the freedom of just being. Upon return, real life resumed with new projects and the steady rhythm of partnership. Jackson volunteered more at the youth center, watching young people find their voices and feeling his own story come full circle. A crisis hit when Maddox's father reached out after years of silence, asking to meet. Maddox was torn, the old wound still raw. Jackson encouraged him. "You do not owe him anything, but if you want closure, I will be right there." They met in a neutral cafe in Pennsylvania. The conversation was stilted but honest. Maddox's father admitted his mistakes without full apology. Maddox left with mixed emotions but lighter for having faced it. Jackson held him that night. "You are not defined by his choices." Maddox nodded. "I know. Thanks to you." As autumn returned again, Jackson received an invitation to speak at his old high school on career day. The irony was not lost on him. He discussed it with Maddox over breakfast. "Part of me wants to say no. The other part wants to show those kids there is life beyond the bullying." Maddox supported whatever he chose. "You would inspire them." Jackson accepted and prepared a talk about resilience and authenticity. The auditorium was packed, students and teachers filling every seat. Jackson spoke from the heart, sharing his journey without bitterness, focusing on hope. Afterwards, several students approached him with stories of their own struggles. One boy hugged him tightly. "Thank you for showing it gets better." Jackson left feeling fulfilled, the visit healing old ghosts. Life continued its steady pace with small joys and occasional hurdles. They bought a bigger apartment in Brooklyn with room for a home office and guest space for family visits. Holidays were shared between Ohio and New York, blending traditions and creating new ones. Jackson's parents grew closer, attending events and even joining them for a weekend in the city. His father and Maddox bonded over football talks, and his mother and Jackson cooked together, sharing recipes and laughs. The transformation was gradual but profound. A misunderstanding tested them when Jackson missed a key anniversary dinner due to a deadline. Maddox felt hurt, assuming Jackson had forgotten. They talked it through late into the night, reaffirming communication as their foundation. "I never want us to drift," Maddox said. Jackson promised to balance better. Their love emerged stronger, more intentional. The following year brought reflection on how far they had come. Jackson turned 30 and Maddox surprised him with a weekend getaway to the mountains. They hiked trails, talked about dreams, and renewed their commitment. Back home, Jackson expanded the studio, hiring more staff and mentoring young designers. Maddox's company hit new milestones, allowing him to launch a scholarship fund for LGBTQ students in tech. They poured energy into giving back the very support they had needed years ago. Family dynamics evolved further. Jackson's sister, who had stayed neutral during the tough years, reached out wanting to rebuild. Visits became regular, and she met Maddox, embracing him as family. The web of relationships grew richer, showing that healing was possible even after deep rifts. Challenges persisted in the wider world. News of rising prejudice in some communities hit hard, but Jackson and Maddox channeled it into advocacy, attending rallies and supporting organizations. Jackson designed pro bono campaigns that reached thousands. Their partnership became a quiet force for change, grounded in love and resilience. Another reunion invitation arrived, this time for the 15th. Jackson laughed, showing it to Maddox. "Think we should go?" Maddox grinned. "Only if we make an even bigger entrance." They did attend this time with more confidence. The room held fewer surprises, but the same old dynamics lingered. Tyler approached first, this time with genuine warmth. "You two look great. Congrats on everything." The mockery was absent, replaced by curiosity and respect. Jackson and Maddox mingled, sharing stories and listening to others' journeys. The night ended with Jackson feeling closure, the past fully integrated into a stronger present. Years later, Jackson and Maddox sat on their balcony, overlooking the city, reflecting on the path from that first reunion to now. They had built a life of purpose, love, and impact. Jackson ran a successful studio, Maddox led a thriving company, and together they raised an adopted son who knew only acceptance. The journey had included pain, growth, and countless choices that shaped them. Looking back, Jackson realized the mockery that once defined him had become the catalyst for his greatest strength. True acceptance requires proving one's worth through success and a visible partnership. True or false?